The 1980s. Time of glitz, glamour, and lots of Hollywood blockbuster sequels, which is pretty fitting because that's exactly what we're taking a look at today in Wonder Woman 1984, not to be confused with George Orwell's book, which features significantly less Gal Gadot. I'll be real honest on that one. Knowing that the world's probably going to be fucked up for the rest of next year as well, Warner Brothers is releasing this, the first of many blockbusters, on HBO Max for streaming until the end of January. So think about this review like this. Think about it like we're finally sobering up together. We've been hooking up with superhero movies in dark theaters with giant screens, popcorn, all our friends, for about 10 years. And we might have been overlooking some things that frankly were always there, but were especially there in Wonder Woman 1984. What does this person we met at the bar actually look like? Well, it turns out they look like someone you really can't talk to for 2.5 hours because they don't have a lot of interesting things to say. And what they do say doesn't make any sense. Now, before you guys swarm my comments, I don't hate superhero movies as they exist in cinema. I hate them for other reasons, like the fact that they're destroying the film industry, and that's going to get even worse after COVID ends and big budgets really need to recoup their lost revenue for the past 2 years. But in a vacuum, as movies, they're fine. They're popcorn entertainment, and I think there's certainly a role for that in cinema. But however you slice it, Wonder Woman 1984 just really didn't do it for me as a superhero movie or as a movie. I mean, I wasn't entertained, I wasn't having fun, and if you're not even doing that, yikes. This movie takes place several decades after the original, and frankly much better, movie, as Gal Gadot lives about her life as some sort of archaeologist in Washington, D.C., and is friends with, again, typecast as an adult dork, Kristen Wiig, and eventually comes to blows with the villain, played by Pedro Pascal. And on an acting level, I mean, you got 3 stars. I'm really not going to complain about their performances. If anything, their performances are the only thing that prevents this movie from being relegated to the absolute bottom of superhero movies alongside Suicide Squad. But the real star of this movie is Pedro Pascal by a mile. If anything, Pedro Pascal presents a very good case for himself to be one of the best superhero villains in, frankly, all of the DCU and even into Marvel titles. And I go to the map for that one. It's a great performance, hands down. He saves this movie from being terrible. He doesn't save it so that it's good. No. It's very much like your ship is sinking, but he's got 2 buckets instead of 1. You're still gonna go down, but maybe a little slower. How long did it take for the Titanic to sink? And that's needed in this film because it takes a little less time than the actual Titanic did to sink. It's pretty close. This movie is incredibly long. Incredibly. And it doesn't need to be. By far the most common and prevalent complaint about this movie is that it takes too long. And like genital herpes and COVID-19, it's prevalent for a reason. It's dead on the money. This film clocks in at about 2 hours and 25 minutes, and it did not need to be a second over 1:45. I'll be real with you. I was watching this movie with someone, and at the 2-hour mark, she turned to me and was like, "Oh, that was a good movie. Did you enjoy that?" And I'm like, dude, we got another half hour left. There's so many needless scenes, so much fat, that all just could have been edited out. And I don't say this criticism lightly, but this movie legitimately would have been better if a first-year film student had watched it one time and given it notes. Because a first-year film student could have told you, like, hey, you know, if your opening scene literally has absolutely no connection to the rest of the movie, maybe cut it out. This movie just honestly needed an editor who was willing to make cuts, and clearly they didn't get that. But what about the action? Wonder Woman's an action franchise. How was it? Honestly, hit or miss. I'm sorry, but I was pretty underwhelmed. What's the most important thing to do in both a movie and a skateboard trick? You gotta start strong and you gotta stick the landing. And if you fuck up in the middle, most people won't remember. Unfortunately for this movie, the middle's really the only part they do well. Both the keystone sequences in the very first scene and the climax are awful. And the climax in particular is one of the worst climaxes I've ever seen in any action movie, certainly in any superhero movie. It's just bad. But I appreciate the fact that they tried to do something non-standard, but unfortunately it just falls completely on its ass. And it was essentially like a fucking punch in the dick for having sat through this 2-hour-long movie. I mean, a 3rd grader could have written something better. It reads like something a 3rd grader wrote. This is a $200 million movie that with an ending that would win a story contest in the 4th grade. The one thing I'll say without spoiling it, there is a former SNL cast member dressed like a furry. And if that doesn't make you go, what the fuck, seek help. Seek help. This movie needs help and so do you, if you don't think that's fucked. How does the plot hold up? Like Swiss fucking cheese. So many goddamn holes. We are like Stanley Yelnats in this motherfucker. There are that many holes. There is just so much that doesn't make sense. The character motivations are all over the place at times. Again, this sort of just ties directly into the pacing. It's all just a jumbled, messed up mess, for lack of a better word. Even for superhero movies where your standards are, you know, a little lower, it just does not clear the bar. Wonder Woman 1984 just showers you with trope after trope, with convenience after convenience, and I'm fine with plot conveniences, especially in action movies, if it's going to make the runtime shorter. If I get out of the theater, or in this case, out of my bedroom to my living room faster, great. I'm not going to complain that, oh, John Wick found a gun, like, right in there. You know, good for him, I guess. You know, let's get to the action. That's not the case here. In this movie, it's like, oh, Wonder Woman's got her lasso. Let me just go walk around the city for a 15-minute sequence. You know, bullshit like that. So at the end of the day, what are we left with? Well, we're honestly left with a movie whose flaws, ironically enough, would have been a little less obvious if we'd seen it on a much larger screen. You know, popcorn blockbusters in some ways are more about the experience than they are about the content of the film. When you're looking at these movies critically, and I'm guilty of not having done this enough in the past, you really start to see that there are a lot of things they do that's really just not justifiable. That being said, Wonder Woman 1984 is absolutely worse than most superhero movies. There are so many things that it does poorly that other superhero movies do better. And it's not just a result of, oh, I'm streaming this on HBO Max and I can turn this off at any second and watch The Wire or watch The Sopranos. I mean, this movie, I'm not gonna lie, this movie has some cool moments, but when you've got a runtime that's almost as long as the bridge on the River Kwai, and you've got Wonder Woman being played by Gal Gadot, and you've got $200 million, you have to be able to get some cool moments. That's not impressive. Sorry. Reports out, this movie is just not worth your time unless you're a huge fan of the DCEU. Imagine if that was a person that existed, right? My final grade for Wonder Woman 1984? A solid C. As in, I don't see why you would botch the climax of this movie and ruin an otherwise average movie and making it mediocre. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Have you seen Wonder Woman 1984? Let me know in the comments. Make sure if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, give me a subscribe, ring that bell if you're so inclined, and share the video. But thank you guys so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Peace.